It was a cold, rainy night, and I was home alone, curled up on the couch watching a movie. The rain was tapping softly against the windows, and the house was filled with the flickering light from the TV. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. I froze, glancing at the clock. It was almost midnight. Who could be knocking at this hour? I cautiously approached the door and peeked through the peephole. To my shock, I saw a clown standing on my porch. The clown was drenched from the rain, its makeup running down its face, giving it a horrifying appearance. It stood there, staring at the door, holding a bunch of soggy balloons. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to decide what to do. I decided to ignore it, hoping it would go away. I turned off the lights and muted the TV, making it seem like no one was home. Minutes passed, and the knocking continued, louder and more insistent. My phone buzzed, and I jumped, glancing at the screen. It was a text from an unknown number. The message read, "I know you're home. Let me in." Panic surged through me. How did this person know I was here? I quickly dialed 911 and whispered to the operator about the clown outside my door. She assured me that help was on the way. As I waited, the knocking stopped. I dared to peek through the window and saw the clown walking away, disappearing into the darkness. The police arrived shortly after, but there was no trace of the clown. They took my statement and promised to patrol the area. For weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I heard a knock, my heart would race. I never found out who the clown was or what they wanted, but the memory of that night still haunts me. The thought of that eerie, rain-soaked clown standing on my porch sends chills down my spine to this day. I was working late one night at the office, and by the time I left, the parking lot was nearly empty. I was walking to my car when I noticed something strange. In the far corner of the lot, under a dim streetlight, stood a clown. At first, I thought it was a prank or someone in costume heading to a party. But as I got closer, I realized there was something off about him. He was just standing there, staring at me, not moving. His painted smile seemed to grow wider as I approached. I quickened my pace, trying to ignore him. My car was parked a few rows away, and I could feel his eyes following me. I reached my car and fumbled for my keys, glancing back to see the clown had started walking towards me. His steps slow and deliberate. My hands were shaking as I finally unlocked the door and jumped in. I locked the doors and started the engine, but when I looked up, the clown was standing right in front of my car, blocking my path. His eyes were cold, and his smile never wavered. I honked the horn, hoping to scare him away, but he just stood there, unmoving. Panic set in, and I threw the car into reverse, backing up quickly. The clown didn't follow, but stood there, watching as I sped away. I didn't stop until I reached home, my heart still racing. I reported the incident to the police, but there were no cameras in the lot, and they couldn't do much without more information. For weeks, I was terrified to leave the office late, always looking over my shoulder. The image of that clown, standing under the dim streetlight, still haunts me. I never found out who he was or what he wanted, but the fear of that night has stayed with me. The thought of being watched and followed by someone so sinister is something I'll never forget. When I was a kid, my family moved into an old house that had been vacant for years. It was a beautiful, large home, but there was something eerie about it. One of the rooms had an old, dusty mirror that my parents decided to keep. They thought it added character to the house. From the first night, I felt uneasy around that mirror. Every time I walked past it, I felt like I was being watched. One night, I was in my room, getting ready for bed, when I heard a faint giggling. It was coming from the direction of the mirror. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I approached the mirror and looked into it. At first, I saw nothing unusual, just my own reflection. But then, behind me, I saw the figure of a clown. He was standing in the shadows, his painted smile wide and menacing. I spun around, but there was no one there. When I looked back at the mirror, the clown was gone. I told my parents, but they dismissed it as my imagination. The giggling and the sightings continued for weeks. Always in the mirror, always when I was alone. One night, I woke up to the sound of soft, sinister laughter. I sat up in bed and saw the clown standing in the corner of my room, partially hidden in the shadows. His eyes were fixed on me, and his grin seemed to grow wider as I watched. I screamed, and my parents rushed in. The clown vanished as they entered the room. They finally believed me and decided to get rid of the mirror. They took it to the dump the next day, and the sightings stopped. But the fear remained. Years later, I still can't look into a mirror without feeling a sense of dread. The memory of that clown, standing in the shadows and watching me, is something I can't shake. The thought of what he wanted and why he was there still haunts me to this day. A few years ago, I took a job as a night security guard at an old amusement park that had been closed down for years. It was mostly a quiet gig, just me patrolling the grounds and making sure no one was trespassing. The place was eerie at night, with its abandoned rides and faded, peeling posters of happier times. But I needed the money, so I took it in stride. One night, around midnight, I was making my usual rounds when I heard a soft, distant sound. It was faint, almost like a music box playing. Curious and a bit unnerved, I followed the sound, which seemed to be coming from the old funhouse. The funhouse had always given me the creeps, with its twisted mirrors and eerie, faded clown faces painted on the walls. As I got closer, the music grew louder, and I could hear what sounded like quiet laughter mixed in. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I had to check it out. I opened the creaky door and stepped inside. The interior was dark, illuminated only by the beam of my flashlight. The music was coming from deeper within the funhouse, so I cautiously made my way through the winding corridors. I finally reached a room where the music was the loudest. It was the main hall of the funhouse, where distorted mirrors lined the walls. In the center of the room stood an old, dusty music box playing a haunting melody. As I approached it, I noticed something else. A figure standing in the corner, just barely visible in the dim light. I shone my flashlight on the figure, and my heart nearly stopped. It was a clown. Not just any clown, but one that looked as if it had stepped straight out of a nightmare. Its face was painted in garish, cracked makeup with a wide, sinister grin that seemed to reel. Its eyes were dark and hollow, and it wore a tattered clown costume, stained and frayed. The clown didn't move, but its eyes seemed to follow me. I felt frozen with fear, but I managed to take a step back, my flashlight trembling in my hand. Suddenly, the music stopped, and the clown's grin widened even further. It raised one gloved hand and pointed directly at me. I bolted out of the funhouse, my heart pounding in my chest. I ran all the way to the security office and locked the door behind me. I tried to calm down and rationalize what I had seen, but it was impossible. I decided to check the security cameras to see if they had captured anything. To my horror, the footage showed the funhouse's main hall, but it was empty. No music box, no clown, just an empty, dark room. I rewound the footage multiple times, but it was the same every time. I knew what I had seen, and I couldn't explain it. I quit the job the next day and never returned to the amusement park. The experience haunted me for years. I later learned that the park had a dark history, and several workers had reported seeing a mysterious clown before the park closed down. Some even claimed it was the spirit of a deranged performer who had died there. To this day, I can't shake the image of that clown in its haunting grin. I avoid amusement parks and fun houses altogether, haunted by the memory of that night and the eerie music that still plays in my nightmares.